The challenge is, you have an Elon Musk, who I am such a fan of for so many reasons I can't even explain, but that man, his capacity is like 150 hours a week. He's superhuman. So if you're ever comparing yourself, oh, well, Elon works that hard, I need to work that hard, you're making a mistake. You are no Elon Musk, don't do that. So you got to decide how fast you want to go. There's no rule of thumb for growing your business. You get to decide that. And I was okay steadily growing it over a 10-year period.
This is Alex Cleanthous, and today we're talking with Gino Wickman about the 10 disciplines to maximize your impact and inner peace from his latest book, Shine. Gino is the author of the best-selling and award-winning book, Traction, along with 6 books that have sold over 2 million copies across the world. And he's the co-founder of EOS Worldwide, which is one of the largest business coaching companies in the world. If you're an entrepreneur, startup founder, or a highly productive operator, this episode is for you. I hope you enjoyed this episode and make sure to subscribe to get the latest episodes as soon as they're released. Now, let's get into it. So, how do you define impact?
I love it. And it's really funny because as we start here, I want to start by saying, Alex, I'm so looking forward to this. Thanks for this opportunity. I hope that we will make a huge impact on your audience today. So great word to start with. So I'll say it a couple different ways. So I define it as, my purpose is to make an impact. And it just so happens my specialty is entrepreneurs. And so I am here to make an impact on driven entrepreneurs. It's everything I've ever created. That's what it's all about. And so I define it as making a positive change in someone's life for the better. In other words, helping somebody get to where they want to go faster. If I can do that for somebody, then I believe I've made a huge impact, because then they're going to tell 2 friends and they're going to teach it to 2 friends. And so the ripple effects kind of go on forever. And to me, that's impact.
And the second definition, how do you define inner peace?
Inner peace.
Inner peace, yeah. Yes.
Right. And so inner peace, inner peace, I define as, I'm going to back into this. So again, my specialty is driven entrepreneurs. Most don't have inner peace. I say that with all the love and respect in the world, and I'm speaking from experience. And so with the blessing and the curse of being driven, our tectonic plates internally are always shifting, and our central nervous system is always amped. And so the opposite of inner peace is a constant uneasiness, a constant chasing. We're always trying to fill a hole inside of us that can never be filled. So I define peace as just the opposite of that, where your tectonic plates are calm, your central nervous system is calm. You just go through life making a huge impact as a driven entrepreneur with an inner peace, a clarity, a calmness, literally a nothingness going on inside of you. That is peace.
So what we're really talking about in these 10 disciplines is, how do you maximize the impact that you have on other people's lives, and at the same time be calm on the inside, which is sometimes, is it a juxtaposition or is it a dichotomy or something? It's like they're 2 opposite things almost, right? Like in terms of kind of oftentimes, if you want to have some more impact, you have to have less peace, because it's so much harder, the journey at least, right? And that's a conversation at least, right? And so that's why this is such an interesting concept, is where you can maximize impact, but also you can maximize inner peace as well. So
you got it.
And we're going to talk about the 10 disciplines, but I mean, high level, how do these 2 things actually just relate to each other? Because oftentimes they don't relate to each other.
Yeah, well, I would suggest to you they absolutely do not relate to each other. So what's beautiful about what you're saying is there's this model that I created called the true self model. And when you're really being your true self, it's when you have maximized the impact and maximized the peace. And they're in the form of an infinity model. So if you understand that kind of sideways number 8, that's exactly what it's illustrating. It's almost like these 2 opposites can work together, and it's this incredible balance of the 2. And so these 10 disciplines we're going to talk about, when implemented in your life, they maximize, to the point you're saying, your impact and your inner peace. In addition to that, they greatly increase your energy, but it's all about the discovery that we driven entrepreneurs, we know how to make an impact. The impact side of it is like falling off a log. I mean, that's the easy side for us. We just don't experience a lot of inner peace. So the irony is is we can have both. That is one of the discoveries I teach in this book, Shine, is you can have both. And what's crazy and exciting and surprising, at least for me, was I realized when I was able to increase my peace, I don't know that I've maximized it, but that's the journey I'm on. The more I increase the inner peace, the more impact I make. So the impact is even greater. And that's, to get your head around that as a driven entrepreneur, it's a really hard thing, because the fear going in is that by finding peace, it will zap us of our superpower. We'll lose everything. We'll lose that drive and we'll lose that impact that we make. And it's just the opposite.
It's like you're talking to me right now, because that is, well, it's funny because the older I get and the more experience I have in business, the more I'm ending up in the place just where you're saying. But I do often think that that hole on the inside you spoke about is kind of part of the drive of people, right? And so that's where it starts a lot of time. I think just where it ends up is that you can't stay there forever. And I think it comes just to a point. So I don't know if it starts with inner peace or it starts with impact and then you move towards inner peace. Is that kind of how you would think about it? Because you don't really start with inner peace, do you? Or do you end in inner peace?
Yeah, well, so I want to zoom all the way out and give you a really big picture context in answering that question, and then we can go really deep, and I'll let you be the barometer of how deep we're going to go. And so in answering that, I want to suggest to you first and foremost, there are 5 pieces of content I've created in the world. Okay, so my obsession is helping entrepreneurs. That's what I do. And so very quickly, you'll understand the point I'm making when I share this. First piece of content is called Entrepreneurial Leap for any entrepreneur in the making or an early stage entrepreneur. The next piece is called Rocket Fuel for when that visionary entrepreneur is looking for their integrator counterpart to grow to the next level. Third piece of content is Traction and EOS for when the entrepreneur wants to run a better business. Fourth piece of content is the EOS Life for when they want to live their ideal life. And then there's the 5th piece of content, Shine, and the 10 disciplines and what we're about to talk about today. Well, in saying that, if you picture that, that's the life, that's the journey of an entrepreneur. And I describe it as climbing the mountain, okay? And so we're all climbing the mountain. We're chasing this thing. We want to ring the bell. What happens, though, I've seen it more times than I can count, including to myself, is we get to the top of the mountain. We achieve all the things we wanted to. We thought that was going to give us this fulfillment and fill that hole. And we're still feeling just as empty, or we're feeling empty. And so this is about going into your inner world and finding that fulfillment. And so now with that context clearly in mind, wherever you are on the journey, yes, you, unfortunately, in most cases, that driven entrepreneur, you got to build the plane while it's flying. In other words, you got to work on inner peace while you're, building the plane, while you're climbing the mountain. And so it's unfortunate. You don't have this luxury at the beginning of the climb to go, climb a mountain, hypothetically different analogy, to go find inner peace and then start your journey. So the truth of the matter, what happens almost all the time is we get to the top of the mountain. You talk about your age and where you are. As we get a little older, we start to reflect more, but it's the entrepreneur that gets to the top, rings the bell, then they start looking inside. Well, this is all about getting that to happen sooner on the climb. And the more and more young people that we reach, we can catch them on the front end. And so that's ultimately what we want, is on the front end, people to find that inner peace so that they both have that drive, that impact while experiencing inner peace. So at a minimum, I'll take somebody who gets to the top of the mountain and show them inner peace. But the ideal is that we show them sooner. And worst case, last point, and then I'll turn it back over to you. Worst case, if all you do is climb the mountain, your soul is going to ping you at some point for inner peace. So it's coming no matter what. So worst case, apply the 4 pieces of content and climb the mountain and realize success, make the money, and it's coming. So that's the worst case. And that worst case ain't so bad.
I have so many questions about the thinking about that, but I think it would be good if we could just go over the 10 disciplines quickly, because I think that's going to frame the rest of the discussion on where, when, how difficult, at what stage, at what point. So can you give, and just within reason, like a high level kind of overview of the 10 disciplines, and then potentially so we can speak about some of them, but then also just really understand the thinking behind this, right? Because everyone should get the book, because the book's fantastic. Everything's in the book, but I want to just get how we kind of start to think about the integration of this, right? So If you could, please, Gino.
Absolutely. So here's a high-level overview of the 10 disciplines. So hang in there, everybody out there. And so these are the 10 disciplines to maximize your energy, your impact, and your inner peace. And so discipline number 1 is 10-year thinking. That's shifting the way you think to get time to slow down by thinking in 10-year timeframes. Discipline number 2 is taking time off. We've got to recharge as driven entrepreneurs. And so it's establishing the right amount of time to take off for you. Discipline number 3 is know thyself. This is really knowing who and what your true self is. Discipline number 4 is be still. It's taking time to sit in stillness and kind of let your soul catch up. Discipline number 5, know your 100%. This is your work container, the maximum energy and value output. We are all unique and different, and so it's determining your 100%. Discipline number 6 is say no, ... often. That one's magic. Number 7 is don't do $25 an hour work if you want to make 6 figures. And so more on that. Discipline number 8 is prepare every night, a powerful, simple discipline to actually help you get more done. Discipline number 9 is put everything in one place, another powerful discipline for capturing all of your thoughts and ideas and issues and all that stuff going on, a more organized approach to the world. And then discipline number 10 is be humble. And so the power of being humble in this world. And so they're there at a high level, and let's drill down on whatever you want to.
Yeah, fantastic. So I think this is it gives a good concept on the methodologies behind this thinking, right? And a lot of this thinking seems to be about creating space and understanding who you are. And I think the harder one, maybe we'll start with the harder one, right? The know thyself, right? Because know thyself is it's a lifelong journey sometimes, right? To figure out kind of who you are and what's important, right? But I feel like before you can know where to focus, how to focus, and how long to focus on, you kind of need to know who you are. So can you drill down on how someone can know thyself?
Absolutely. And as we dig into that, what I'd love to do is just an overriding statement, because you said something so powerful that is so perfectly said, because this is all about creating space. It is that the 10 disciplines, when implemented in your life, create a platform, a foundation, the space and time for you to maximize your peace, your impact, and your inner peace. And so that's what it's all about. And when they're all 10 implemented in your life, they have a magnifying effect. So you could certainly just implement one and you will get great benefit. But the real magic happens when you implement them all in your life. And where this came from is I've been living by these for 30 years. I built EOS Worldwide living on these disciplines, and I never intended to share them with the world. I was preparing to do my keynote address at our annual EOS conference. I needed a new topic, and it just came to me. I was sitting in my meditation chair, and I just realized these 10 things that I've done habitually for 30 straight years. I shared them with that audience, and the rest was history. It went over so well. I ended up putting it in a book, and so here we are. So with that, now let's go deep into discipline number 4, know thyself. And so each discipline starts with a bold statement. Okay. And so I'll give you a bold statement. The bold statement is designed that if you would just please listen to me and do what I tell you to do, you would just do it. But unfortunately, most human beings won't do that. You got to be sold. You got to be convinced. So here's the bold statement, and then we'll get into the nitty gritty. So the bold statement is, be your true self 100% of the time, 24/7, 365. If you would just do that, you'll realize all the benefit. Now, easier said than done, but doing that, I just want to share with you some benefits, and then let's dig deep and you ask whatever questions you want. But if you will do what I just said, you will burn less energy. You will stop being a chameleon. You will be more authentic. You will be freer. You will have more fun. Your freak flag will fly. You will float. You will experience true freedom. You will channel your energy. You will reach what I call the synchronicity pocket, which is like that perfect synchronicity pocket where amazing stuff happens. You'll be a better leader. and you'll release what's not yours. And so there's my jumping off point. Let's dig as deep as you want to dig.
Well, so how do you start to figure out who you are? Say, for example, if you're in the early stages, right? And you're building it as you go. That's obviously harder because you don't know yet. But even as you get older, right? And you have more experience, but then oftentimes with more experience comes a lot more responsibilities, pressures, external stakeholders, and things like that. And so you can often lose yourself, I guess. And so how does someone start to understand themselves so that they know where they should really be spending their time more so?
So I'll describe it this way. So think of it, picture it as almost like a journey. Okay. And on that journey, the journey starts very surface. And just hypothetically, this isn't a perfect way to look at it, but let's pretend we're looking at a 20-something, a 30-something, a 40-something, and a 50-something. So this level of experience in life. And with the 20-something, and we talk about going very surface and then deep, I look at it as kind of levels, and sometimes it just starts with understanding your skills and abilities. So in your 20s, start to learn what your skills are because it's different for everybody, and what are your abilities. And then again, as you mature and grow and have experience, so don't tie it so much to an age right now, but once you get clear on that, then it's about understanding your personality and your traits, really who you are. And then you get into your strengths and your weaknesses. And the analogy I like to share is picture yourself as this block of marble, okay? And inside that block of marble is you, your magnificent self, your true self, the soulful you, burning bright. And it's a matter of chipping away all the marble that isn't you and getting clear on what is you. There's a lot of ways to look at this, but the clearer you get on those skills and abilities, strengths and weaknesses, you start getting clearer and clearer. Well, the magic starts to happen when you keep going deeper and deeper and deeper into that, where we start to look at who are you truly? What is your true self? And this is where you start to get into addressing things that are holding you back, weaknesses, blocks that you have. So there are things that happen to you in your life that are these energetic blocks, trauma you've experienced, pain, and you start to learn that in some cases you've built this masterful structure to protect you from the world, and that facade is not you. And it's time to start chipping away the facade because, in our 20s, and for me, I remember it when I was 15. So when I was 15 and I started drinking, my ego and I joined forces, and I was able to create this perfect tough guy facade. And I buried all of my pain and trauma from the past. And I just created this package that served me so well for the next 35 years till it was time to shed it all. Well, the point I'm making is the sooner you start shedding that stuff, the facade, the protective layer, again, those blocks of marble, that's really getting down to the muscle or your soul. That's when you really start becoming your true self. But, so that just got really heavy, and we can get as heavy as you want.
I like going heavy fast.
Here. But for the audience that's not ready, we can stay surface. And when you say, how do I find my skills and abilities at 23 years old? Profiling tools are very powerful. Myers-Briggs and DISC and Colby, and there's so many wonderful profiling tools. So just doing those and working with a consultant that's an expert on those tools, you'll really start to understand those things. Again, that's more the surface stuff, really, really important. Then we can get into the deep stuff, which is shedding layers, as I like to call it, shedding your shit, as I lovingly call it. And that's where the real magic happens.
I fully agree with you on that point. And I think that is the harder part, is understanding who you are in terms of the traumas and the drivers and the strengths and the skills and like those types of things. Is there a fast way in to that? Or is that just an ongoing process? Because I've taken the long path. I'm wondering if there's like a shorter path. For the audience.
Unfortunately, I took the long path too, but I'll share a couple of things with you on this, and I'm going to try and share it fast. But there's almost like three contextual points I'm going to pull together as fast as I can. Because, what you're touching on, this book, Shine, this is what this book is about. Okay. And in the beginning of the book, I share a discovery, and the discovery is about understanding that all decisions are made out of love or fear. And when you understand that basic principle, love or fear, these are also your thoughts, feelings, and emotions. So I'll call all of that decisions. Well, it's this aha discovery where you realize that as you go forward in looking back, you realize all of the decisions, thoughts, feelings, and emotions that you've made from love or fear. Well, let's trade out those words for what they really are, love and fear. Love is coming from your true self and your soul. Fear is coming from your ego. And so what you learn when you really drill down to the root of this is you start to see your ego has you hijacked. It has created this persona and facade that's trying to protect you from the world to never feel the pain that you once felt. Its intentions are good. It's being a protective mother, but you've got to dissolve and shed that ego if you really and truly want to be your true self. So that's point one. Point two, you're asking, you want to ask something on that before I go to the next point?
No, I really like that statement. You need to shed your true ego. You need to shed your ego before you can find your true self. You need to shed your ego. And in a world of social media profiles and personal brands and, kind of like all of the LinkedIn posts and the TikTok creators, and like it's all about the ego these days, right? And oftentimes the ego is linked to business in some way, but like I think that's a first little thing, right? Separating ego. Well, that's not your true self. It's just interesting.
You got it. And so watch this now. I'm going to take you through the next 2 points to answer your question about, the speed pass for doing this. So, it didn't happen for me, but what did happen for me is I got pinged. My soul got pinged at 30. That's when I started to really see the facade and work at it. And I would shed some layers over the coming decades. But it was age 52 when I was sitting at home. I sold my business at 50. I was sitting there 2 years later. I sold so well, just in terms of I had no involvement in the business the day after closing. I was pursuing my new passions, like life was good. And so I was sitting there celebrating my life. And then, oh my God, did the universe hit me over the head? So I got hit with the universal 2x4 and all my pain and trauma from the past. My facade finally said, okay, enough. So I did a lot of shedding, but I didn't do the big shedding. And so the last 3 to 4 years, from 52 to 56, I'm 57 now. Oh my God, did I shed stuff? So I took the long road. Here comes the third point. I believe there is a speed pass, but I believe most of us cannot have that benefit. But here's my point. Going back to the first point, when you understand, it's really simple, very complex, but when you understand the fact that the facade, the pain, the trauma is simply your ego protecting you, and that it's all energy, and your ego is this cocoon wrapped around your true self protecting you. The day you realize that it's that simple, and you realize it's just a matter of shedding all the trauma, which means all that shit that happened, it happened. It happened. In other words, we're hanging on to it. We're making up stories. We're so afraid it's going to happen again. We're protecting ourselves. That can all be shed and let go. And so for 99.99% of us, we got to take the slower road. But this book creates such a context. I really believe there's some number. It's a very small number, just so you know, but a small number when they see this. I hope one of them are in your audience right now. When they see this dynamic, they will shed it all. And I'm snapping my fingers in a second. Very, very, very few. The rest of us have to go through therapy and read books and do plant medicine. And I mean, we give 30 ways to shed in the book. Okay. But there are people, once you understand this and that it's just your crazy ego hanging on to everything, you can let it all go. So it took me, 30 years / 3 to 4 really intense years in this last 3 to 4 years, but it's possible. And again, worst case, you take the slow road. At least you'll get there, man. Just keep working toward it. And these 10 disciplines in your life create the time and space for that wonderful stuff to start to happen.
And I think that's the important part as well, is that the goal is to understand yourself, and the goal is to get closer there, right? And so everything else that we're going to be talking about, I think, is linking kind of more to this, because in my experience, that's the hardest one, which is why I kind of started with that, because that kind of centralizes around everything. And a lot of who you are is kind of is based on your experiences in the past and your traumas and your successes and your loves and your fears, right? So I think that is a link to your impact and your peace, right? Starting there, right? But the other thing I was mentioning before is a lot of this is about the creation of space. Space seems to be the next level of productivity, right? And not in the beginning, right? Because I think this is a little bit of a trick thing where it was like, oh, well, I'll just work smarter, not harder. And I think in the beginning, you kind of just need to work a little bit, right? But at some point, you can't work any harder, right? Yeah. And you're still not satisfied and you're still not having the full impact. And so then what do you do, right? And from what I've found, a lot of time is creating space. And a lot of these seem to be around creating the space. So can you talk about, because space is such an interesting thing because it is more productive if you use it well, but it's also, you're sitting on the couch maybe. And so it looks like you're being lazy, but it's space, right? So can you just talk about like how you think about space and the impact?
Yes, you bet. Well, and what I'll do is I'll pull 3 disciplines together to make your exact point that how these are creating space. Okay. And so I'm going to grab, know your 100%. I'm going to grab be still, and I'm going to grab take time off, and I'm going to put them all in one nutshell, because by knowing your 100% is your work container. Okay. And that's knowing the number of hours per week and weeks per year that is your maximum energy output. Every driven entrepreneur have this perfect number. I know it's hard to believe, but it's true. So for me, it's always been 55 hours a week, 40 weeks a year. That's my maximum output. And maximum output means 1 extra hour per week, you will start to burn out. 1 less hour per week, you'll start to get bored. There's a formula for everyone. So once you know that just created space outside of that. Number 2, take time off, is deciding what is your magic number of days off. I've always taken 150 days off a year for the last 30 years. I take the month of August off every year. I take time off because I know what that does for me in recharging my batteries, but it creates space for the magic to happen. And then the third is be still. Be still is taking time every day, 30 quiet minutes, to do one of 4 things or a combination of both: to meditate, to contemplate, to journal, or pray, or a combination of those things. And the combination of all 3 of those is where you've now created space, because then what happens now that you've created space and time in your life for this, in meditation or one of those other forms of stillness, stuff will come up. If you will just pause and just stop and pretend 30 minutes. We urge you to start with 10 for those of you that have never meditated or taken stillness before, because you got to build up to this. But the point is, what I realize is the people that resist it, when you sit in stillness, you finally stop yourself and get calm, your soul is going to start screaming at you. The stuff that needs to be shed, it will start screaming. That's why most driven entrepreneurs freak out with meditation and they say, oh, I can't do that. Well, you can do that. Your ego just doesn't want you to do that, but your soul does. And so the idea is to stop and let your soul catch up. Because what I always lovingly say when you get into this practice, stuff will come up and stuff will come down. So what that means is you will get downloads, which is very profound and powerful, but don't worry about that. Don't expect that, but also stuff will come up. So stuff comes down, stuff comes up. You'll get downloads, but stuff will come up, meaning your body, your soul is going to scream, and there will be sensations. And when these past pain, traumas, experience, these things you're hanging on to and your ego is trying to protect you from, when they come up, they will come up with just as much pain as they went down, and that does not feel good, but that's your body trying to release it, shed it, get rid of that block. And when you release it, like we talked about before, your energy will go through the roof. That block is finally gone. It's not holding you back anymore, and you become more of your true self. And so the point is just to start the process. Same thing with taking time off. Most driven entrepreneurs, they're just working so hard, they never take time off to recharge their batteries and do the stuff they're supposed to be doing in their personal life. And so it just gets scary because it's the opposite of what we're used to. It doesn't feel productive. It doesn't feel like we're making an impact. And everything I'm telling you will make you a better entrepreneur, make you a more impactful entrepreneur. It's just really hard to grasp because our brains just don't work that way.
How do you figure out your ideal number of hours of work per week, right? Or per year, right? So for you, it was 55 hours for 40 weeks a year. Is that right?
Yeah.
And so how do you get to that point? Because, it goes from 100 hours to 50 hours to 80 hours to 60 hours to 100 hours. Like, it just depends on the year, the week, the month, the time of the decade, whatever it is. Yeah. So how do you get to the point where like that's about the right number?
Yeah, you bet. So the way you do that is a few words: awareness, time, practice. It takes work to figure it out. But here we are. Let's pretend like I figured out mine at age 30, and here I am at 57. Okay. And so if you're out there and you're 20 years old and 30 years old, it may take you 5 years to figure it out. But if you're 30 and it's going to take you 5 years, that's 35. Now you got 30 good years of knowing your perfect work capacity. So it just takes time. It takes awareness. It takes focus. It takes effort. So you really have to work at it. But the context to start with and the awareness is to believe and understand that there's a perfect number of hours and a perfect number of weeks. And so now you just start paying attention to it, because I've always been an 11-hour-a-day guy. I'm a 7 to 6 guy. It's like my perfect formula. And again, like I said, an hour less, I get a little bored. An hour more, I start to burn out. And so you just got to play with it. Keep playing with it, playing with it, playing with it.
How do you know the difference between 11 hours in a day and 12 hours in a day or 10 hours in a day? Like how did you get to that point where you're like, okay, cool. And then that's part one of the question. Part two of the question is, how do you assess the impact of those hours? Because I'm assuming that's a component of it too, right? So it's like kind of effectiveness and time, right? And it's on like a scale, right? And so the more time it gets to a point where the effectiveness starts to come down. And so you've kind of found the right kind of balance. But how do you know an extra hour or two here or there, right? Because that extra hour or two per day, per week, per year, per 5 years, per 10 years, that's a lot more hours of productive time, right? So how did you kind of get to that point? Or how does someone understand that point?
Well, I'm going to say it a little different than you're asking, and let me know if this indirectly answers your question. Okay. So let's just pretend for a moment. I'm going to use me as an example. Let's pretend you figure it out. And hypothetically, let's pretend you out there, you're a 50-hour-a-week person and you're going to work 42 weeks a year, just hypothetically. So there's your work container. So watch this. Now we're going to bring in some disciplines into this awareness, because now that you know that, your job is to maximize that time and protect that time, because now you know what to say no to. Now you know what $25 an hour work to not do. And now you know how to apply your true self, your true craft to the world. So now follow this and watch this. So now you know it. You go forward, you're growing a business. Well, we all could work 120 hours a week, so where does it stop? So now you set boundaries, and the way it works is anything that shows up that requires more time that is in your work capacity, it has to be delegated. You simply have to delegate it. That's how an organization grows. That's where you start to hire people to help you and support you with stuff, because you can't do it all. I mean, I'll debate you to my death. You can't do it all. And I'll win the debate, just for the record. I've got really good patience. So now let's play with that. So now you're protecting your boundaries of time. You're delegating anything that tries to consume more of that time. So you're protecting yourself. Now, all of a sudden, inside of that work container, you're doing the stuff that is the highest impact, highest value stuff that you have to offer to the world. You're in your craft, i.e. true self. So you just keep delegating and elevating the things that are $25 an hour work, low energy work, and elevating yourself to more and more and more high value work. Again, that's where you stop doing $25 an hour work. That's where you're saying no to anything that doesn't fit. So that's where you start to get really good at the highest and best use, maximum value. All of a sudden, you're making more money. Your business is growing faster. You can afford these resources. But, the 100-person organization, it went from 1 person to 100 people. That's how it happens. And you just have to keep elevating and elevating and elevating and elevating yourself while delegating low energy and $25 an hour work, staying in your work capacity. And again, I'm here to tell you, I did this for 30 years. I built a company that grew 40% a year for 10 years, successfully sold that business. And I did not sacrifice 1 hour of that protected capacity, because I would just keep delegating and elevating.
So just for clarity, just because I'm interested as well.
Yeah.
When it comes to 6 p.m. on a Friday, is that it? It's off. And now I'm going into my time off of 150 days, right? Because the 150 days includes kind of weekends, includes all the holidays, but then there's an extra kind of, say, 30 days of holidays on top of that, right? So that's how you got to 150, right? But is it complete switch off from Friday night until Monday morning?
100%. The FBI can't find me. So, but let me give you I want to share a couple of things. Please, you're about to say something. Please say that.
I was going to say, so please share that, but also if you could talk about some tips or hints or advice for how do you switch off from Friday till Monday? Because like sometimes, like the pressures of business, right? And kind of the bigger the business and stuff like that, right? So how do you literally be able to switch off?
So a couple of really important points. So every day was not 7 to 6 because there's some days that were 6 to 5 or 8 to 7. But so 11 hours is my average, and one day might have been 10 hours. And the next day might have been 12, but my average was like 11 hours a day, 55 hours a week. Okay. Mm-hmm. So that's really important. It's not that perfect, but there's a perfect number of hours that I know. And it was 50.
So you're not that much of a machine where it's like 7 a.m., 6 p.m., Monday to Friday.
Exactly. But it was 55 hours. So I knew that capacity. Number two, I absolutely turn it off, and so every once in a while, is there the exception that like when I sold my business, I was so out of balance for about a 3-month period when it was most intense. So sometimes you'll go through intense period, but that's not a forever thing. You look at that 10-year time frame, and those were very rare exceptions. But what's important, and the most important point I want to make is, you out there, you have conditioned the world to believe you're available 24/7. You did that. And I have conditioned everyone in my life that you can't find me after 6. You will not find me on a weekend. I will not reply to that text on a weekend. I have control of my calendar and my life. So that's really important. And then the last piece I would say is you need a great team. I've always had a great team. So if you're a one-person show and you're doing everything, then you probably do need to work 100 hours a week and you can never turn it off. You got to start to build a team and you got to start. So it's a journey, but you got to start protecting that time. You have to. And if for no one else, do it for the people in your life. Just if for no one else, start there. But at the end of the day, you got to do it for you. You got to do it for you. Until you're ready to do it for you, you're never going to do it.
It's interesting because I don't know, there's a conversation out there, or there's a lot of conversations out there, but there's one where you need to work harder, faster than everyone else. Do you know what I mean? Like that's how you win in business, and it's very competitive, right? And so what you're saying is actually, wait, like, yes, you need to work hard. It's important to find the ideal number of hours a week, right? And in those hours, extremely, extremely fast, extremely effective, but it's also okay to stop. And if you stop and actually have some time off and create the space, the time spent actually on that work is far more impactful. And because it's more impactful, like it's a lot more kind of aligned, right? And so, and it's also like kind of something to say as well, it's okay to have time off, entrepreneurs. It's okay to have a weekend. It's okay to have a personal life. It's okay to have a family. Do you know what I mean? Because I think there's this, and maybe I'm just like a bit more kind of old school now, but like this kind of thing where you got to put everything into it. And if you put everything into it for 10 years, it's still hard, but then there's a chance of success kind of thing. And so what you're saying is actually, maybe it's faster having some space and making the space because it reduces kind of burnout. It gives you more perspective and clarity, kind of just helps everything just fit kind of more into place. Like, is that a good summary? And if you disagree, feel free to disagree.
No, it's, I'll share a couple of things because I don't know if it's an agreement or a disagreement, but I would say this. You have to work hard. There's no way you're going to accomplish what you can accomplish working hard. And I work very hard, but I work very hard within that work capacity. That's the definition that people aren't getting. Working hard doesn't mean 24/7. I believe, I'm not tooting my own horn, but I accomplish more than most driven entrepreneurs in my work capacity because I work really hard, but I'm also delegating. It's like I think about today, I texted 5 things that got delegated off. I can't tell you the number of things that as I went through this very intense day and got all my stuff done and worked really hard, I delegated, had to be 12 things today. So a lot of stuff is getting done. And that's how I'm able to stay in those hours today. If I did all those things I delegated, today would be an 18-hour day. I can't do it all. So first of all, I protect that. But the hard work goes on inside the container. I believe in working hard and playing hard. I work very hard and I play very hard. And so on my time off, I'm having a lot of fun. So work hard within the container. That's the point. And then the challenge is, you have an Elon Musk, who I am such a fan of for so many reasons I can't even explain. But that man, his capacity is like 150 hours a week. He's superhuman. So if you're ever comparing yourself, oh, well, Elon works that hard, I need to work that hard, you're making a mistake. You are no Elon Musk. Don't do that. And then the last point I would make is, let's pretend for a moment you're going to identify your work capacity, your 100%. And you're starting a business, okay? And I'm speaking from experience, okay? You can build that business within that container, and it may take you a little longer, but is that okay? To me, that's okay. So it may have taken a little longer to build the business, but I stayed so balanced and I was able to enjoy life while doing it. It was worth it to me. But if for some reason you feel like you need to grow twice as fast than you would have, then, expand your capacity to 100 hours a week. I'm not so sure that that's the right answer. So you got to decide how fast you want to go. There's no rule of thumb for growing your business. You get to decide that. And I was okay steadily growing it over a 10-year period.
I really like that. The example of how Elon Musk, so his, what's it called? The perfect amount of time, like a week, is potentially 150 hours, because that's just how he is, right? And for you, it's 55 hours. It could be 70 hours for me. It could be 40 hours for me, right? Understanding that. But it generally starts with working more hours and reducing than working fewer hours and increasing, right? Like the problem is not, hey, cool, so you don't work enough, because then you don't have a business, right? But it's more, you're working way too much, and probably you are far less effective now because of the extra hours. So if you just reduce it, there's an ideal spot just where the impact and the time are optimized, right? And then past that point, you're starting now to check emails that are maybe not important, or you're doing things that have less value, and you're starting, to spend time on, say, $5 an hour work because it's so low value that you probably wouldn't even spend money on it. You know what I mean? So it's like, but you think you're working because it's technically work, but it's not as productive. So is that kind of accurate to say? Is that It depends on each person, but you're aiming not to be sitting in front of a computer or something like that, right? But you're aiming to be getting the maximum kind of output from every hour you spend. And so for you, that's around 11 hours a day for 5 days a week on average. And for others, it could be 10, could be 8. It's unlikely going to be 16, because you're not going to be able to sustain 16 hours of productive time every day of 5 days a week for 10 years. And that's what you think about as well, is the 10-year path.
Exactly. And unless you're Elon Musk, remember, you can do 18 hours a day if you're Elon Musk, but he's such a rare exception. Stop comparing yourself to him. So I'll say 3 things fast. Number 1, I was able to do it in my startup phase in my work capacity. But so there's that. But what I will say to you, so if you're in a startup mode and this next year, you're going to kill yourself working 14 hours a day to get your startup off the ground, I get it. But how many more years are you going to do that? And then, yes, you took the words out of my mouth. Look at it as a 10-year horizon. You can accomplish anything in 10 years. The issue is most of the time you're wanting it now. You want it all now, this year, next year. Slow yourself down, man. If you're sitting there and you're 35 years old and you're a startup entrepreneur, you have 50 good years. What in the hell are you hurrying toward? There's nothing to hurry toward. As I look back, when I was 35, 22 years ago, oh my God. It's like there's so much time, but for some reason, when you're a little younger and even older, there's 40 and 50-year-olds thinking this way. You think like you're running out of time. You're just not, because even if you're 55 years old and you started your startup, 10 years from now is 65. At 65, you still got 20 good years left. So again, what's the rush? What's the rush? So when you slow yourself down like that, 10-year thinking, you start making better decisions, time slows down, and ironically, you get there faster. And I'm speaking from experience.
I mean, this is definitely a challenge I still face, is like slowing down to go faster. I mean, like, so I'm kind of an entrepreneur that essentially worked 16 hours a day for like 10, 15 years. And that was just kind of the time I just spent. And now I've just noticed it's becoming not as many hours because the company's got like a bit kind of just larger and so on. So that shifts. But in my personal life, like I do some golf and some piano and some other things like that. Like, and I have some coaches, right? And every single one of them says, "Slow down, Alex. It will be faster if you slow down." And it took me forever to figure out what the hell that means, because as an entrepreneur, it's like faster, faster, quick, 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 sprint, 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 that way. And then, but there's something that happens, I think, over time, maybe not in the beginning, I'm not sure, but where slowing down actually is faster because it helps you kind of focus on a few things and get the techniques right and get everything correct so that it goes faster later. And I think sometimes it's when we're sprinting in the beginning, you don't get that. But there is a balance, because if you go too slow, speed is important in business, right? So how do you balance 10 years, but also the fact that speed is important in business? You know what I mean? Like, how do you...
Yeah, and if you remember, I used the term synchronicity pocket earlier. You're talking about the synchronicity pocket because it's finding that perfect balance, not too fast, not too slow. The issue with driven entrepreneurs is they're all moving too fast. So that's not always a problem. But for the rest of the world, they're moving too slow. So there's this perfect speed that I call the synchronicity pocket where the magic happens. And synchronicity is just where everything kind of falls into place. And so you got to find that speed. And so thank you for the golf and the piano example. Those are two examples that when you slow down learning those two things, everything's better, but it's the exact same thing in business. And so it's for you to find it, because, you know, I'm actually still moving too fast. What's important to say is I'm not perfect. I don't have this all figured out, you know, so I'm still, I don't know where I am on this journey to freeing my true self. It's a hell of a lot better than it was. But my point is, I'm still moving a little too fast. But what I realize is I've now caught myself enough times where I get into that synchronicity pocket. I've yet to move too slow for what that's worth. But when I look back and realize how fast I used to move, the good news is, and just to use real numbers, let's pretend I was going 150 miles an hour, you know, and let's just pretend for a minute that 80 miles an hour is like my perfect synchronicity pocket. I think I'm probably at about 85 miles an hour now. You know, I'm so close, and I can feel it when I hit 80. And I can also start to feel it when I'm at 85. It's so close. And so this is another thing. You got to play with it. You got to be aware of it and just find your synchronicity pocket.
And I think a lot of this seems to be a psychological challenge a lot of the times, right? Because it's the discipline to stop and to create space, right? Because a lot of our other 10 kind of disciplines is not extra, essentially anything, right? It's all less things. It's all space, have time, you know, just understand yourself, you know, stay still, spend time on kind of high impact. Like, it's all about just doing fewer things that have a lot more impact, which is very, very hard to do because you don't know like all the different kind of places to focus, right? So is this where having a 10-year plan and essentially really spending time every night preparing about the next day, like, is that the combination? So the first part is, all right, cool. So I have a plan for 10 years, but then every day I'm thinking about the next day in context of the 10-year plan. Is that how you kind of get a bit of that space?
Not quite, but you're close. You're like right around it, because what's important about 10-year thinking, that particular discipline, the discipline is to shift your mindset from thinking short term to thinking in 10-year time frame. So it's actually thinking. It's less about planning, although planning is like a bonus. It's about thinking. And so it's about making every decision that you make from this day forward with a 10-year time frame. Make every decision a 10-year decision. Like when I created EOS, I created it to last 100 years. Now it's lasted over 20 years. I don't know if it'll last 100 years, but I know that it will last longer than if I was just thinking short term. What does the world need right now? It would not be here, or it would be different. So it's thinking long term. It's the decision you're about to make right now. Make the decision with a 10-year time frame in mind. And so like a silly thing is if you expect to be healthy 10 and 20 years from now, and you're about to eat that piece of cake, you probably shouldn't eat the piece of cake. And if you want to be happily married or great relationship 10 to 20, and you're about to say this thing to your significant other, you may want to not say that thing. So it's making these decisions. And so same thing with business, and if you want to have $10 million in the bank in 10 years, well, you got two choices, so are you going to go buy the boat or are you going to put that in your retirement account? So it's just today's decisions with a 10-year time frame in mind, and you'll just make better decisions. So that's that point, a little different than how you're saying it. The preparing every night discipline is about, it certainly all ties together because when you're preparing every night, you're making 10-year decisions. But that is about somewhere when you finish your day and your head hits the pillow, you finish your work day and your head hits the pillow, it's taking 15 minutes and laying out the next day in chronological order. So before your head hits the pillow, have tomorrow's plan in place. And so what that's getting you to do is just lay out the day so that when you end your day and your head hits the pillow, you will sleep better. You're not stressing out about tomorrow. You wake up and you hit the ground running. So it does so many things for you psychologically, emotionally, physically. You will actually get more done than what most do. And that's waking up, hitting the ground running, checking emails, and letting the world take your day over and hijack your day. Where by doing this, preparing every night, you're in control of your day and no one can upset your apple cart for the day because you're in total control.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic point. And I like the clarification on the 10-year thinking, not planning, it's 10-year thinking. And also just when you think of things in a time period of 10 years, a lot of things aren't important, and so that's also helpful to know. It's like, well, is this really important? Because this is not the other thing I've learned across my career is that most things aren't important. In fact, 99% of things are just not important and everyone thinks everything's urgent. And yeah, sure, it's urgent, but if it doesn't happen, no one really cares and it's not that much of an impact. There's not that many things actually ever that have that much importance in the world. It's just that we think they do. And so understanding that first, it will lead you to being a lot more humble. And this is the part which I wanted to kind of just end on because I really love this one is to be humble because what happens in the beginning when someone starts to have some success is that they overinflate how successful they are and how important that success is, right? And then over time, you get smacked around like crazy over like a 10, 15-year period. And then you come to a point where you're humble and you're like, something, but this is much. And you understand that there's a lot of things which you don't know. And so you really become a lot more humble with time, right? But can you talk about kind of humble in context of the 10 disciplines and kind of how you think about it in terms of Shine? The book?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, each discipline starts with a bold statement. So the bold statement with discipline number 10, be humble, is view yourself as an equal to every person on the planet. And so that's the bold statement. If you'll just do that, you'll get all the benefits. And so let's talk about the benefits. The benefits are you'll attract better people in your life. The journey is better. You'll be more peaceful. You'll become a better leader. You'll have nothing to prove. You'll be more free. And so with that, I always describe this with a spectrum. Okay. And so picture this spectrum, and all human beings are on this spectrum, where on one side of the spectrum is arrogance. And on the other side of the spectrum is humility or humble. Okay. Well, if you look up the definition of those two words, it's exactly the same definition. It's your view of yourself in comparison to others. And humble people feel like they're equal to everybody else. And arrogant people just feel like they're a little bit better than everyone else. And so if you understand that, we are all somewhere on that spectrum. And I urge every one of our clients to just be honest, where are you on the spectrum? And if you really want to get punched in the face, ask the 5 closest people to you in your life that you love and trust, and ask them to put a hash mark on the line of where they feel you are. And it might be a little depressing when you see your reality. So, but at least there's your starting point. And so the idea is just to live a humble life and be humble and just view yourself as an equal to everyone. And you will realize all of those wonderful benefits. And then one last little point, actually 2 last points. Gratitude is a very powerful way to become more humble. If you will just start to become grateful for everything in your life. So my discipline is every night when my head hits the pillow, I say thank you to whoever and whatever, but I just say thank you. And something about being gracious and gratitude and appreciative for the things in your life just brings you down to the ground. Number two, a recent aha I've had when you think about that arrogant and that humble, those two sides, what I realized is arrogant is ego, humble is true self. And so when your ego's online running the show, you're just more of an arrogant person. Arrogance comes from ego, but humility comes from true self. And so when you shed all that stuff and you're just real and raw, and we're all a little screwed up, and we're all just human beings, and we're normal, and just being our true self, you'll just come off as a humble person. You'll just be humble being your true self. So there's the best kind of color I can give you around that in a short period of time.
Yeah, sure. And I think what's interesting about the conversation about being humble is that when you start to know something and when you start to learn something, there's this feeling of superiority that you get initially. Hey, cool, I know something that's better. Or assuming if you've had some early successes, right? Now you think that kind of, it makes you a better person or something happens, right? And so you tend to inflate your own idea about yourself, which is where it can be a lot more arrogant, right? And then over time, people get a dose of reality just where, well, what you thought was going to happen actually wasn't going to happen. In fact, the opposite happened. In fact, everything that you thought was true was not true. And then you start to kind of self-reflect a lot. And then over time, you realize that you are just like everyone else. And there is a strength to not thinking that you are better than anyone else in anything else. Yeah. So you might have skills that someone else hasn't got, but that doesn't mean too much in the world, right? Because the important thing in the world is your impact in the world, right? It's not what you think about yourself, which is the difference, right? So, and this was essentially kind of the topic of the book, right? It's how do you maximize impact and inner peace, right? At the same time. So this is how we started, right? And so I think part of that, well, a big part of that is that you need to have that kind of humbleness. Otherwise, you're not going to have the peace, and you may not even have the maximum impact, right? So it's like, I'm trying to pull it all together because it's all kind of similar thinking about kind of understanding yourself, creating space. I guess it's adding value to the world, and it's just knowing that you're just a person in the world, right? You need to enjoy your time, spend time with family, spend time at work. You should work hard, but also there's something about it's important to let go and to just come down a little bit, right? Still work hard, but, create this space. And really, this is the book of self-discovery, right? Because at the end of this, it's like, because everyone is going to work for their whole lives pretty much, right? Like, especially entrepreneurs are going to be doing it for a lot of their lives anyway, right? But it's all about how do you not miss out, so not kind of miss out on life because you thought it was a certain way, right? And then you work for 15 years and then you're like, oh, wait, it's not what I thought it was, So how do I make space now? Because I don't want to, just repeat that. And I think a lot of the disciplines in this book help you to get to that place kind of faster. And what's interesting about it is that if you start to implement these practices, it will get there faster, which is the converse thing, right? So it's almost like a shortcut to avoid the common mistakes that every entrepreneur will go through. And those mistakes lead to a big loss of life, not of life. That's where, you lose out on the important parts of life, right? And maybe you didn't have to.
Mm-hmm. That's so well said. And yes, everything you said, that's this book in a nutshell. And that's what it's all about. And, you talk about self-discovery. That's the irony. And you said it, I'm just going to say it a little bit different is because I think about people, driven entrepreneurs listening to this conversation and going, what in the hell does this have? What does this have to do with business? And it's like, it has everything to do with business. It's so profound and powerful when you realize that inner peace and shed that stuff, because it makes you a better leader, a better entrepreneur. You're more impactful. And we are all the same. We're just human beings trying to do something great in the world. And we're all a little screwed up, and we got trauma and pain and stories we made up that we need to shed. That's what everybody's going through. When you understand that, that's where that humility comes. And then it makes me think too of, climbing that mountain. It's like, again, you can just keep climbing and succeed by every outer world metric. But the idea is to get you to stop off at intervals where you're going, wait a second, I'm stopping off on my climb and I'm going to sit over here for 2 weeks. Why am I doing this? Well, that 2-week break that got you to look inside, see some stuff, learn some stuff, all of a sudden made you better and faster. And now you got up the mountain faster. And by just taking those breaks during the climb, you will get up there faster and better, and it'll be more enjoyable. And so anyway, for what that's worth, just piggybacking on everything you said, because you said it so perfectly there.
I really appreciate that, Gino. Thank you so much for coming on this podcast. This has been such a fantastic conversation. How do people connect with you?
Great. Well, the place to find us and all things Shine, the book Shine, is a website called the10disciplines.com. Okay. And so you can spell out the word 10 or put the number 10 in there. But what you'll find when you go there is a couple great free resources. Okay. And so first is a free downloadable first chapter of the book. So the first 27 pages to see if that pulls you in. And if you love what you see, go ahead and buy the book. And you can buy it at all major retailers, and we'll direct you on the website to do that. There's also a true self assessment that is free. And it's a wonderful assessment where you're going to answer 20 questions about yourself, and you're going to get an answer that's going to show you how free your true self really is. Where are you on this journey? It's very, very powerful. We actually offer a free coaching session with that, with your results. And very, very powerful. And then if you want to go deeper into the rabbit hole and really embed these 10 disciplines in your life, you can take our self-study, you can take our group coaching, and then we offer a mastermind, which is where we really go deep into what you and I have been talking about on this podcast and really kind of shed everything, which is a lot of fun. And so that's what we have to offer you. And so just go there and dive in and implement these 10 disciplines in your life.
Yeah, fantastic. And I have all these links in the show notes, so feel free just to check them there. And it's just highly recommended. So like all of the thinking in this book, all of the points in this book, like the book has put a lot of kind of the things I've learned over my career as well, like into a really good framework that is for entrepreneurs, but that's not about business. It's about you on the inside as an entrepreneur, like as a human, understanding that and making space, because a lot of the way we think that it has to be is not true. It's just that somehow it's evolved over the years. And this book has done a fantastic job at just giving you the areas to focus on that is not the skills of business. Yeah, that is not the technical part of the role. It's about who you are. So highly recommended. But thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Gino. And we'll chat soon.
Pleasure, Alex. Really enjoyed it. Thank you, brother.
Thanks for listening to the Growth Manifesto podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, please give us a 5-star rating on iTunes. For more episodes, please visit growthmanifesto.com/podcast. And if you need help driving growth for your company, please get in touch with us at webprofits.io.